Sri Ma Anandamayi's given name was Nirmala Sundari, which in English would mean the taintlessly beautiful one. By all accounts, this name was appropriate. She was a very winsome little baby. Everyone who came to see her was immediately enamored of her and could only leave her presence with some difficulty. Her mother got used to the sight of even strangers stopping over to admire the baby or play with her for a while. One occasion especially lived in her memory for all time. They were visiting Vidyakut at the time. One day Moksha Devi saw an extraordinary looking person with an air of luminosity about him. Approached the playful infant who was about 10 months old at this time and squat in front of her as if paying homage. Glancing at the mother, he said, "You have a very special child. You will not make an ordinary housewife of her. She is the mother. She belongs to the world." Moksha Devi thought he was an eccentric, but his words lingered in her memory. Kyora, the playground for the Leela of childhood. Kyora was a small village. The west side consisted of just two Brahmin households surrounded on three sides by Muslim neighbors. There were other Hindu families on the east side. The two sides were separated by big fields and forests. There was a shortcut through the habitation of the Muslim families. As soon as Nirmala was old enough to walk by herself, she could be seen skipping and dancing along this path ever so often, and also stopping at all doors which were open to her. According to Indian customs, all elders are given family epithets by the children. The Muslim elders also were known to her variously as Nana, Chacha, Dada, Bua, and so on. The entire village, no matter how far flung the cottages, became one big home to the little girl. Nirmala was a very friendly child. She would readily render whatever service she was capable of to whomsoever was in need of it. She fetched and carried for all neighbors as well as her own family. She was uniformly good tempered, never gave any trouble to anybody. In fact, her mother does not recall that she ever threw temper tantrums or cried in distress. Yet two incidents are recalled which were exceptions to this rule. It so happened that after the birth of Nirmala, three sons were born to her parents in due course of time. Unfortunately, the eldest Kali Prasanna died at the age of 7, and the other two in childhood and infancy. Moksha Devi at all times the personification of courageous fortitude, at odd moments would succumb to grief and shed quite tears. If Nirmala happened to see her at such times, she would set up such a wailing that her mother was obliged to hasten to her comfort, her own tears forgotten. The other instance of crying took place when Nirmala was yet an infant. A young girl called Ekabbar from one of the neighboring Muslim houses was especially fond of Nirmala and, and came to play with her every day. One day, Ekabbar started a new game for beckoning the child from a little distance. When the baby eagerly and smilingly started to crawl forward, she would step further back and beckon again. After 4 or 5 times of this tantalizing maneuver, the baby sat back and started to cry loudly. A couple then quietly picked Nirmala up and shouted to quieten her. The sobs and wails increased to such a degree that Ekabbar was frightened into giving the baby back to her grandmother. She never played such a teasing game again. When both girls had grown up, Ekabbar would sometimes recall this incident. "What a baby you were, how you cried. It was an extraordinary experience for me. My hair still moves on my scalp whenever I think of it." There were others who could recall strange experiences with the baby. Kyora was inhabited by many of her grandmother's contemporaries, who were all dadas and didis to her. One dada, Krishna Sundar Bhattacharya, was in the habit of tossing up the baby and catching her again in his arms. The child expressed her delight in gurgling laughter. Once, as he held her up, she placed one foot on his shoulder and stretched out the other other as if to place it on his uplifted arm. Suddenly he cried out, "Catch, catch!" and almost fell down to his knees. It was not quite clear whether he wanted people to catch the infant or support him. He put the child down, ejaculating in great wonder. What a strange girl! It was conjectured by the onlookers that the weight of the baby had suddenly become unbearable. The family noticed that when playing with the child, he never again attempted to toss her aloft. As Nirmala grew up, her family and neighbors found her a joyous elfin creature ever at hand, making herself useful to everyone in the village, irrespective of caste, religion, or social position.